Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening, everyone. It is June 27th, Monday, June 27th. I'm your host, Trish. This is The Missing Piece, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. And also, I want to thank Carnation for sponsoring an hour of the show, as well as the network. And tonight, I've been doing things a little bit different the last few weeks. I've had guests from all different backgrounds, and I do love stories of transformation. So tonight, I'm excited to welcome my guest, musical artist Kevin Roth. And so, welcome, Kevin.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
Yes, it's so. Kevin has an amazing, again, another transformational story. After receiving a very negative medical diagnosis. So I will let you tell that, Kevin, kind of how, kind of your background before that. You had experienced many things in life before you got that. That was 7 years ago now?
Yeah, 7 or 8, just about. Yeah. Well, I started out in life as a musician. I was born with a ear for music and also some sort of a internal quest for spirituality. It's just those two things were part of my bone marrow, so to speak.
Oh, wow.
And when I was 13, I saw an instrument called the mountain dulcimer and made that my life's work. But before that, around the age of 8, I started to have OBEs, which is out of body experiences. And I saw 3 phases, almost like watching a movie preview of my life. And the first phase was when I was very young and I was going to have a difficult time kind of figuring everything out, which I did. I had a difficult time. And the second phase was I'd continue to have a difficult time, but I'd be very successful musically and in business. And the third is that I would finally be happy and I would become a teacher of esoteric work of some sort. I don't really know what it was. So at 13, I saw the dulcimer, and at 15, I got my first record contract.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And the fact that, so when you were 8 and these out of body experiences started happening, did you recognize them as such at that time?
No, I described them I have a book coming out in the fall called
Really?
Between the Notes. And I said that it's very difficult to describe an out of body experience because we have an expression here in California. There's no there. I don't feel in or out of my body. It's sort of like, it's almost
Right.
as if I'm seeing a vision,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm feeling the vision too. So when I was in Florida, when I was 57, I had an out of body experience where I was shown that I would have a serious illness, but that I would survive. It wasn't frightening, but it was more like this is what's going to happen. And it did. So when these things come, they're very random. And when people say, well, what is an out of body or any of these experiences? And they think that it's woo woo. It's the same thing to me as where music comes from. How did I play the piano without ever knowing how to read music when I was 4?
Mm-hmm.
Artists create artwork, portraiture, without studying art. So there's a lot of stuff in life that's real bizarre, and we just take those for granted. But when we bring up other stuff,
Right.
what are you talking about?
I yeah, I'm the same way. I, started I was very good at piano from a very young age. Didn't even have to try, and the same with art. But I think scientifically they've tried to prove that that's just um, the other side of your brain working that most people don't utilize. Either way, that has nothing to do with the outer body experiences. So 15, you signed your first record contract.
Yeah, my first record came out in 1972, and it was on a folk music label called Folkways, which are that whole label is part of the Smithsonian Institute. And for a decade, I recorded for them adult folk music. And the reason I got into music as a profession is because I thought if I got rich and famous, I'd be happy. And as a kid, I had a lot of troubles with dyslexia and being kind of, you know, not understanding why the moon isn't falling into the earth. And I wasn't a typical kid. So I just assumed I would choose to go with what people liked that I did and what I felt comfortable doing, which was music.
I think I the same as far as autism and ADHD and things like that. And I think that we do a lot of it's been discussed. A lot of my guests have had what society would consider a learning disability, but have been very talented people. And I think, do you think that that creates a lot of, they call it like the masking that we do to conform to what we think others want us to do, or, um, how we're supposed to, I don't know, I guess, be in society as far as that those standards go.
Well, my theory is, and I've done a lot of research on this stuff, because scientists and ancient spiritual texts are now agreeing that life is pretty much an illusion.
Hmm.
And you could even take something as simple as they say that science says the universe is expanding, but into what?
Right.
So we don't question that, you know. But my theory is that everyone is born with this longing for that consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it. People who have had near death experiences describe that as love and being home. And I just know we come from there and we're put on this experience, this kind of dream ride, and we're looking for it, but we don't realize it. So, what we do is we try to find other things that make us feel content and happy and loved and validated. So, for me, that was music. Other people think it's money, other people think it's, all kinds of things. But essentially, what everyone is looking for is that reconnection
Right.
to whatever that is. The weird thing is that we're already connected, but we don't know that,
Yeah.
which is the reason I'm writing the book.
So after 15 and signing your label, um, and that's regardless of everything else, that's a young age to deal with fame or money or anything, anyways. So where did your life kind of what path did it take from there?
Well, I went, I would take any folk gig I could, folk festivals if they book me. I mean, I played anywhere just to get known. Um, I
Right.
I became known in the folk music world for dulcimer music for sure, and people like Peter Paul and Mary and Judy Collins and Pete Seeger, the people that were my heroes, knew of me. But I never made it to like the stardom of folk music. But what was interesting is when I got into the dulcimer playing, there was just the beginning of a wave of dulcimer players and builders around the country. And so I became known as one of the world's innovative dulcimer players because my albums were one of the few you could find.
Wow.
So I caught that wave, and it was good. It was nice.
That's and so what year was that around?
Well, that was 74, and so I would say around 1976, people started to really kind of know who I was.
Okay. The 70s, which is ironic. I just bought a bunch of records from the 70s that just random, different at an estate sale, a bunch of,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it would be in my life, it would make sense if that happened, but you could be on one of them.
it could be.
That
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah, the funny thing is I gave all my albums away because I didn't think I'd ever own a record player again, and I just bought one. And my
Yeah.
albums, you can download them on the Folkway Records website or get a CD of them. But I went on eBay to see if I could get some of mine, and they're like they're really expensive. They're being sold for 30 and 50 and $80 an album. I
Wow.
can't afford my own album. It's not that I can't afford it, but it's like, oh, it's funny though.
Yeah, but so I luck out with things like that because this estate sale, the people they probably didn't even look through all of this lady that had passed away. They probably didn't even look through all of her albums. And I'm like, do they know what I mean? She had shelves and shelves, and if I had it was their last day, last hour, whatever. If I had more cash on me at the moment, I would bought them all because they just wanted $1 for them for per
Uh,
record. And I'm like, that's I don't know. My cat is going crazy. I'm sorry if y'all hear something that sounds like she's dying in the background. Um, but so you went on to that, and what age was it? I guess that you became unhappy with. Sometimes our hobbies, things that we have passion for, like me and art and stuff. When I started doing it as a job, you can get burnt out kind of very easily, and then it doesn't feel like it's not that exciting as a hobby anymore. Um
Well,
y-
I had a lot of unhappiness to start with because my mother died when I was 13, and my
oh,
father remarried very quickly. Like 2 months later, he met
oh
somebody,
wow.
and it was a disaster for. I mean, the whole family was thrown into upheaval. So I had that going for me, and then I had the idea of trying to make it as a musician. So I was unhappy. Honestly, I don't think I was. I didn't get happy till I was about 58, to be honest with you. What I would consider happy. Like I'm real happy now, but
Did your father help you in your
oh yeah,
music career?
yeah, he was wonderful. He was also an artist, but not musical,
Okay.
and he really supported me. But he was born in the 30s, so doing things that should have been done, like going to psychotherapy as a family, was like, no, 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 no. I'm not spending money on that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, they they didn't acknowledge it back then.
yeah, yeah. So, but he was supportive, and what happened is in 1984, just by fluke, I heard that there were children's music was becoming popular.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, let me try that, even though I wasn't really into kids' music. And that's when my career really took off
Oh, I
because
bet.
I did a lullaby album and I started my own record label. And the album sold really well. And there was a guy who was given my album as a gift. He was a television producer. And he put his daughter to bed with my album every night and called me one day and said, we're doing this PBS TV show with Ringo from the Beatles, and it's based on Thomas the Tank Engine, and it's called Shining Time Station, and I want you to sing the theme. So I was there, like white on rice, really fast. And when that show came out, it was an instant hit, and suddenly I was heard by millions of people. So that changed the game for me because I had made a whole bunch of children's albums and I had this catalog of music. And now people were really paying me to sing because I was a name associated with that show.
Well, and back then, I grew up I was born in 81, so the 80s, PBS was, well, we only had like 3 stations back then, so So for kids, PBS was the station you watch,
Oh yeah,
for
yeah,
any
yeah.
of that, and that was during the times of I do remember music became very big back then, especially music and books, because it was a time of reading Rainbow, and they had so many musical programs on there too. Um, but that was exciting because people in other countries that might not know this, um, we didn't have that was the first station of its kind like that to cater towards children's shows, right? I mean, I don't remember the other ones were networks, but
Yeah,
that
they were
was always adult shows.
educational shows. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it was a big deal. We were excited when we got to watch PBS.
Yeah.
um so after that, I guess moving forward to your medical diagnosis and all of that, between that time, was there anything else drastic in your life that your career really took a turn, either positive in a positive or a negative direction?
Yeah. I became rich for the first time in my life because I owned a catalog of albums. Yeah, and you can find all these on iTunes or Amazon. They're all up there under Kevin Roth. And I was able to license them. So I made a bunch of money, and I had a house in California and a fancy car and all that stuff. And I still was not happy.
You weren't happy.
And I didn't
Yeah.
really enjoy singing for kids because I kind of wanted to sing adult songs. And young children at that age, they don't want to hear adult songs. They want to hear songs that they know.
Right.
So there, I was being paid well to do something. I loved writing the songs for kids and making the records and doing the deals, but I wasn't accustomed to looking at an audience of uh, adults holding squirmy kids,
Right.
which is really just their nature. But I didn't get it at that point. So I said, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not going to do this anymore. And the money I had, I lost a lot of it in the stock market crash in
Hmm.
1998. So I moved to Florida and I started a little retail business thinking that I wouldn't have to go on the road and perform anymore and I could be home. And it was an eclectic little store of furniture and food. And I had that for a while. And then in 2013, the tornado in my life came. So my father, who was my best friend, died. My
Oh,
partner uh, and I were in a 9-year relationship, and that ended. And I almost went bankrupt from the store. So I walked into my apartment and I asked myself, what do you want? Money isn't going to buy you happiness. Fame is fleeting. So what do you want, Kevin? And I said, I want to be spiritually enlightened. And you got to be careful what you ask for.
careful what you wish for. Yes,
Yeah, really.
I have learned
I
that.
had that OBE experience that showed me that I should move to Kansas, where my sister was,
To
and
where?
Kansas in the
Oh,
middle of
that's where
the
I live.
country.
Yes.
You live in Kansas?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yep, I'm in Topeka.
Oh, okay. So you're just down the road.
Yeah.
And I got an apartment. I lived with her for a little bit, then I got an apartment. And within 2 months, I just went for a routine dermatology appointment. And to make a long story short, I got a call one morning from the doctor saying that you have stage 3 melanoma and you need to go to an oncologist. And I had an OBE experience the night before
Wow.
where my father came to me and said, you're going to hear tomorrow, and it's going to be bad news, but you'll be okay. That was more of a vision, I think, because I was looking at a picture of him. But these experiences don't feel one way or the other. They
Right.
just are. So
I guess as a medium, I've had similar experiences looking I reading photos, or I didn't recognize it as such at first though. But the same kind of same scenarios happen when and the thing with that and um with my experience anyways in the spirit world, or people who have passed on, ancestors and such, you're picking up their energy, so you are absolutely receiving a message from them. um, but it has always been, in regards to when it comes to a picture, something, an event that has happened, uh, either in the future, or I mean has happened in the past, or that's going to happen in the future, and that's the message. um, and that's how a lot of mediums read photographs anyway. So I didn't know if you knew that. That's like
no,
that's
but
a yeah.
it makes sense.
Um, it'd be interesting if you would, if you have other family members from other time periods, even that you could try that with. That would because it's not always bad. Maybe it was easier for him to um he probably had to use more energy to pass on that specific message, because it was something that was going to be very big and important, negative and important in your life. But um yeah, as far as any message, you can do that with photographs. Well, I take that back. Nowadays with modern technology, if they have all the filters and all that, sometimes it's harder. It's like because it destroys the original image, I guess.
Well, they
But
get through when they need to talk to me. I find these things out. I've had a lot of weird experiences like this.
really.
Oh yeah, lots of them.
So you're okay, so you got the diagnosis, and what did you I- initially? What was your reaction? Were you scared? Were you
Oh, I was terribly frightened because suddenly I was in the cancer world, and I never thought in a million years I would have
right?
cancer. I mean, I never smoked, I worked out, but what happened is I walked through my apartment that morning and said out loud, "Don't worry, buddy, we'll get through this." And it was the first time I recognized myself as my own best friend, and that there were two of me. There was an inner voice thing, and there was the mind, the rattling monkey mind. Not that I hadn't been aware of it before, but I had never thought of myself as having compassion for myself or empathy for myself. And then all kinds of weird things happened.
Weird
So,
things?
yeah, like I got diagnosed, and then I had to have tests done to see
Right.
where else it had spread. And I went looking for oncologists that I liked. And I only went by photographs on the internet.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I picked one guy I really wanted, and he wasn't taking any new patients. So I got stuck with this woman I didn't like, but she was able to schedule. And I went in for the tests, and she said to me, "The cancer hasn't spread anywhere, but you should do a lymphectomy, which is where you remove lymph nodes, because they found one lymph node that had melanoma." And I said, "If there's not any signs of cancer, why would I have lymph nodes removed?" And
Right.
she said it's protocol. And I said, "My name isn't protocol." And I walked out. And when I was going out to see the receptionist, I saw the doctor that I wanted, his card there. And I said, "Does he work here?" And she said, "Yes, but he's not taking new patients." And I said, "Oh, yes, he is." And I was there at 7:30 the next morning. And I had seen other oncologists, and they all wanted to do something to me.
Yeah.
And my gut said no. He was the only oncologist that said, let's not do anything because there's no cure and there's no point in doing these things. And that's what I teach as a coach. We haven't even talked that I'm a life coach for people. The reason
Yes.
I became a life coach is because teaching people how to listen to their gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, the things that these people wanted to do to me were horrific. So I followed my gut, and I also found someone who had been through the cancer experience with melanoma, um, Prudence Sinclair, who has a website, and she guided me along with Dr. Gower. And I was there. Oh man, I had all kinds of weird trips happening to me there in Kansas. It was like Dorothy.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Uh,
Kansas is
yeah.
it's
Uh,
another world here.
but one of the
Um,
things that happened, I'll just tell you this real quickly, is I was on Netflix and I saw a movie of a guy named Yogananda, who is an Indian spiritual teacher that teaches self realization. And my gut said, just look up to see where his fellowship is. And I knew they were in California, but there was no way in hell they were going to be in Kansas. But there was one a quarter mile down the road from me.
really?
Yeah, and that set me on a whole different direction spiritually.
And so was this like a retreat place or an
No,
actual
like a church.
oh, okay.
And Yogananda teaches uh, that there's a God and that everything is a dream and that you just have to believe in God and so forth. I never really followed him, but it was through self realization that I found Ramana Maharshi, who was a well known uh, guru in
Okay.
India who's very well respected, and an author in California who would become my teacher who wrote about Ramana named Robert Wolf. So that's when the real healing began, and that's when everything changed.
Now, I guess during that time, I it's crazy. Do you think that because when people are given a specific amount of time to live with no cure, that's like with me. I was like, well, if there's then why am I seeing doctor? I just stopped seeing doctors and taking their medication and everything. I don't suggest people do that. I'm not a doctor, but I'm saying for me, when they said there's no cure, you either make it or you don't, there's nothing we can do. It's like something went off, you know um that I was like, well, if I'm gonna die anyways, I'm gonna make the rest of my life, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I think by doing that alone, that makes you more present in a sense, and enables you to heal yourself essentially. So it's
that's
kind
what
of a
happened.
mind over matter thing.
Well, that's what happened. Is then I asked myself, "What do you want, Kevin?"
Hmm.
Again, and I had to ask myself, "What matters? Why? And what am I going to do about it?" And all that mattered was my music, my art, and my dog. And I said, I'm not, if I end up dying, which I seriously doubt I will, I'm not doing it in Kansas. I mean, I'm going to go to Southern California and live in one of the most beautiful cities in the country, San Diego. And I had no money to do that, but and this is one of the other reasons I've become a life coach, is I created a vision of who I was and what I was feeling and looking like and the whole thing. I could almost taste it. And I made it happen. And I went in to see my oncologist and I said, I'm leaving. It's almost been a year. Nothing's come back. And I'm going to California. And he said, well, let's do a scan and see if there's any signs of anything. I said, well, is there a cure? And he said, no. I said, well, then why do I want to know? And
Right.
he said to plan your life. I said, what life? Because this past year, I'm not doing that again. I
Hmm.
said, so I'll go to California. At least in California, they have assisted death They don't have that in Kansas, you know.
No,
So
they let
I,
us suffer.
yeah. So you said that I, so I moved out here and, been checked by a dermatologist twice a year and it never came back. But I created a whole nother life. And that's when someone said, hey, you ought to teach this, what you did, and use the dulcimer in a meditative way to earn a living.
Wow.
And then that was the third phase that I saw as a kid. I became a teacher with esoteric teaching. That's what happened.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's so that well, but also it's amazing that you remembered that as a kid. So many times after numerous traumas in your life and things that had happened, it wouldn't be surprising if you had forgotten, many of those spiritual things as a child.
Yeah, they're
Um,
imprinted in you. I mean, you
well,
know,
right, and something resonates, and
oh
you
yeah,
remember it, but in that much detail is fascinating, I guess.
yeah.
Um,
I don't know how that worked, but I remember feeling all of those things and having a real clear sense of them and feeling like somebody dropped me off on this planet like a summer school I didn't want to go to and I just wanted to get home.
that's how I felt all my life. That I
Yeah, a
was,
lot of people, millions do,
yeah,
which is why I'm writing, which is why I'm writing the book, because I talk about that kind of thing. You know, my editor said, you need to explain out of body experiences. And I said, how do you do that?
yeah.
How do you explain the unexplainable? So I came up with this close an explanation as I could. It's sort of like seeing a preview of your life in the movie theater.
Hmm. That's what I've well, one of my near death experiences that happened, and I know, as cliche as it sounds, because people see it in the movie all the time. It was literally like an old projector, of parts of my life.
Yeah,
Um,
you do.
it was in slow motion, yet very fast, because it went all the way back to, before I was born, like probably as a fetus. So, but you can't, you're right. There's no way, unless one experiences it, to explain that. Now, one of the times, which is interesting because, um, I saw that other people have experienced this as well. I was in like a giant library, but the
Mhm.
books were all people. So
Hmm.
kind of like our oh my gosh, what's the word? I just forgot it. Akashic record.
Mm. Hmm.
But each person, like each person's, not just their life, they're all of their lives, all of their past lives, all of their existence,
Right.
um, anywhere in the universe, were represented as a book, basically. So as a kid, when that happened, I was struck by lightning. Um, I I thought of it as being like maybe like a very important library in the world, like one of the oldest in the world, and those being all the people.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's so strange, and I talk about this a lot, especially with my clients who make a big deal out of about a lot of nothing, but it seems like a big deal to them.
Hmm.
And I tell them, this is your mind. Your mind is telling you this stuff, and if you switch thinking to something else, that doesn't really exist anymore at that moment, right? So when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. But take the mind. Everyone says it's the mind, right? It's the mind, it's ego. But where's the mind? If you slice open a brain, you can't find a mind.
No.
So the scientists and the spiritual people, or Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle, they all say everything is consciousness. Okay, so what's
Hmm.
consciousness? Okay, well, it's God or Jesus or Moses or whatever it is. But you can't how are you going to describe that? It's not
Right.
described. But if we come from that, we are that. We can't be separate from it. But we get caught up in the stuff that goes on in the world. I mean, there's some really bad stuff. Like this guy Putin, man. If anyone's listening in Russia, you need to get rid of that guy. You know? But
Yeah.
uh, you know,
But he was also, well, I don't know that confirmed. I mean, that's what media says, that he was diagnosed with cancer too. So maybe he took it to the opposite extreme, like he was going to watch the world burn. You know what I mean?
yeah, maybe so. But I guess the point I'm making is that when you look at the real reality, I mean, we're on a planet supposedly spinning at 1,000 miles an hour in the middle of nothing.
Mhm.
We're made up of atoms. Atoms are 99.999 point empty. That's science. Are we empty? So who are we? So that's why I said that I started to get happy when I was finally 58 and I got cancer, because cancer woke me up to the
Mhm.
fact. And that's why people come to me as a personal coach, because I literally teach them how they can change their world, change their life. And you can't deny science. I mean, science is science. And then it connects to the ancient spiritual texts that say the same thing.
Right.
The same thing. So, what are you doing getting caught up in the price of gas? I mean, we do live in a dream experience for sure, but you're going to be out of it or in or wherever in no time at all. And why are you getting so aggravated about it?
And we literally create our reality. I tell my kids all the time to 100% be careful. I don't watch the news or anything because that's not my reality. I don't want that to influence. I mean, yes, it is important, these things that go on across the world and everything, but as far as I don't want that negativity in
Right.
my life, in order to for my healing. And so um it is very important to pay close attention. I always tell them to what they read, what they watch, what they absorb, on social media or who they're hanging around with, or because that becomes your reality.
Yep.
Um, 100%. And it took me literally dying to figure that out as well. Because other it, and it's crazy how what a simple concept it is,
Oh,
but we
yeah.
don't see it, until you do, and then you can't unsee it. But
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's right. That's true. So that's why sometimes people have to hit bottom
yeah,
to get it. But you don't need to hit bottom. So if all these people listening to the show are intrigued by this, then they need to look into it. It's not just
absolutely.
absolutely like, oh well, I happen to listen to Trish Mo show. It's nothing like that. You were meant to listen to the show at this particular time. That's it.
Absolutely.
And that's how it works. The whole thing is an elaborate hoax. I think it's hysterical when you really look at it.
Hmm.
Um, but then I say, all of those years, you were searching for money, fame, relationships, all these things to make you happy. But you knew as a little kid that this wasn't real. But these are the things I needed to go through, I guess, karmically or whatever, which
Hmm.
is also false. But that's all in the dream experience. And so now I just do things that make the dream fun.
Well, and it's funny because if you look at, in the last few years, especially, you start hearing about everyone's a narcissist, everyone's this, everyone's that. What I mean, well, I do think that the biggest narcissists in the world are doctors and governments and all of these things that keep us stuck. And I watched a really interesting, that my daughter's home. Well, summer, it's school's out, so something. Well, it wasn't random. I don't believe in coincidences. Like you just said, everyone who's listening is meant to listen at this moment in their lives. And so something came on one of her shows that was a man um, showing an experiment with fleas. They put, you've probably heard of this, fleas in a jar, covered it for 24 hours, I think. And initially, all of the fleas were trying to jump out of the jar. When he came back 24 hours later, took off the lid, none of them would jump out. None of them would go past the top of the jar. Not only would they not jump out of the jar, even though they were capable, but they had been conditioned for 24 hours. Their offspring also would never go past the top of the jar, even without a cover.
Mm, mm.
And that's profound in showing how, even as humans, we do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Like generations, it's 100%, it's in your DNA, and it's your, because we're all everything else, and everything else is us. So we follow that pattern since like Egyptian times, probably before.
Yeah, but when you had your near death experience, did you have a feeling that you were home?
I did. And then afterwards, it was something that I longed for even more so.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what happens. So a lot of people don't believe in these things, but there are doctors and scientists that have had them, and it's been documented. Ebner Alexander, Raymond Moody, Mary Neal. She's a spinal surgeon who drowned. I mean, she literally drowned.
Oh,
I think for 20 minutes she was dead. And she has this whole story and a couple books about it. So, you know,
well, and
everything
it's
is
interesting. Everyone always comes back to, well, I went through, I don't know if this happened to you, but I went through a period right after that. And you go through this whole spiritual awakening and such. And I thought that I was already dead. For that matter, then I went off on this whole, mind explosion rabbit hole that I'm like, what if we're all already dead? Because if there was something, like when the dinosaurs went extinct or or something, then but we had prepared for that prior to make a simulation or whatever, or maybe this was like an in between place, then would any of us know we were actually dead? I started going into all of these, like if
or
we
does
all
it matter?
yeah, if we all died at once, then but we had prepared for that. Um, so I went through that stage for a while. Um, asking the what ifs, or what is real, or what is not real, or maybe I'm crazy, or maybe,
Well,
nothing exists.
well, like you said earlier, you can't unknow what you know. So
No.
I have a friend who's very upset with all the things that's going on in America here with the Congress, I mean, the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
and the world's a mess and all this stuff. And I said, just don't watch the news. And he said, that's ridiculous and yada, yada, yada. But he's been in a bad mood for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And now stress and inflammation cause cancer.
absolutely.
So why do I want, to do that? So he said that I was being complacent. And I said, I just vote.
Hmm.
And, what can I tell you? I'm a Democrat, and, Democrats are there's a president and all this stuff. But, what, what's going to happen is going to happen. All I can do is what I do. But I'm certainly not going to spend my time getting upset
Right.
for 2 weeks about not. Yeah, I don't get. I try not to get upset about anything because I think it's all just ridiculous.
It's wasted energy. Well, I mean, it's just not a good use of energy, I
Right.
guess. And the thing is, and numerous spiritual leaders of the past throughout history have said this, if every person just sought joy and happiness and lived in the present, in their one, which is hard to do in this world, it really is, um, then we would have no need for governments. We wouldn't have a need for,
True.
um, certain laws, because people wouldn't have, they wouldn't be worrying about what everyone else is doing. They wouldn't be worrying about, none of those human constructs would exist.
Right.
so
Yeah.
we wouldn't be confined to them.
Yeah. So as a coach, as a personal coach, I teach people there are certain tools that you can use to make yourself happy. There's certain understandings that you can learn that gives you a positive perspective, and you have to be willing and interested in changing your behaviors. And if you do, you do that. I have clients that have more money than they know what to do with, and have heard me on a podcast or heard me talk somewhere, and they come to me and they say, I want what you've got. And it takes me a long time to get these people out of the head frame that everything is money.
Right.
But when they get it, their lives change.
Yes.
So it's not that not having money is any good, because that's not good. But money doesn't not buy it. Just doesn't buy happiness.
No, they say, the some of the poorest people in the world have the largest bank accounts.
It's funny because you say that because in the book, between the notes, it's coming out in the fall. I think I mentioned it. There's a thing where I talk about that. There was a taco stand, and there were these two. I think that they were Mexican workers, and they were sitting at a table, drinking a beer and having tacos and laughing like they had just won the lottery. And right across from them was a guy in a business suit on his cell phone, and in the other hand, he held a taco, and the sauce, which was red, was dripping down the side of his hand, and it looked like blood at first. And he was yelling at someone on the phone about something financial. And I thought, here's a perfect example. You got two guys that look like they have no money, they're living it up. And this guy, who's walking around in a three-piece suit in front of his Mercedes Benz, is miserable.
Mhm.
So you have to find a balance, and I've been broke, and that's no fun, and I've been rich, and that's been interesting. Where I am now is comfortable, thank God for the moment. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but while everyone else is freaking out, I'm having a good time.
Well, and I think so in your out of body experiences or near death or anything like that, I know for myself, I experienced all of a sudden those things didn't. You can't take any of that with you. You can't take your things or your car or your money or your anything, So it just became silly. When I came back to reality, I'm like, why do I have all this stuff? And then all of a sudden I wanted to get rid of everything I owned
That's what
and
happens. Yeah.
become a minimalist because I'm
That's
like, I
what.
don't need all this clutter in my life. I just want to think and be at peace.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens.
And you
That's what.
realize that a lot of those things that you buy are just trying to fill some sort of void that you didn't need to fill because it didn't need filling to begin with. You're always there. Even if you die, you're still there. You're not going to lose yourself.
That's what I was saying. It's called the longing. I call it the longing, and we
Do you
buy
think
things. Mhm.
do you think that that's what scares most people in your experience with your clients? Is it like death and dying?
For some, but I think what made makes them upset is that no matter what they do, they never feel satisfied. Even if they become successful, it's fleeting. If they fall in love, the love changes, and people think that there's more out there. And of course, there's always a whole bunch of people who are just content the way they are, which is fine, too. I mean, it depends which side of the nickel you want to. It's all perception. And I'll tell you an interesting story about perception in a second. But to answer your question, I think that I agree with you that people are filling in the hole in their soul with stuff. I became a minimalist. The only thing I have a lot of are dulcimers, the instrument I play, but that's it. I mean, uh, so perception. You want me to tell you an interesting thing about perception?
Yes,
So this painting behind me, it's kind of pretty, right? It's
I
very
think so.
colorful. Yeah, so for people who aren't watching this, it's multicolored. And it's about 4 feet, 4.5 feet long by 2.5 feet wide. Okay, so I was telling a friend of mine that there was a famous Peruvian painter, and his work was collected by a guy here in La Jolla, California, who died and had a lot of this guy's artwork, and had a friend selling the artwork. And I was able to get this piece for only $5,500. You can't see behind me, but there are paintbrushes that are glued on to it, the paintbrushes that were used to
I
do the
can kind of
painting.
see. Yeah, I didn't know what that was on the
Yeah.
top there.
Yeah.
Huh, that's amazing.
So my friend said that. He said, "Oh my God, that's amazing." He said, "I said, do you like it?" He said, "Well, it's not really my kind of art, but," he said, "it's really a cool piece. And how much would it normally sell for, normally?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, 10, 20,000, but," and he said, "Wow, And then I told him the truth. I went to Home Depot. I bought a board, and I got acrylic paints, and I went all over the canvas, and I smeared it around, and I put the paintbrushes in there. The whole thing was 150 bucks. The whole thing.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, "Oh," he said, he said, and then he wanted to kill me, of course. But I said, it's perception.
yes.
It's the story that you believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so before I told you that, you were impressed, right?
I'm still impressed.
Yeah,
I
there
love
you are. You're
art,
still impressed.
so either
So
way.
if you can do that story with a painting, imagine what you can do by reimagining your life.
Wow, yes.
Okay,
That's
so you start a podcast, right? And you say, "This is what I want it to be," and you're feeling it. You feel the story of your podcast. You feel like it's already happened. You already know it's successful, right? A lot of people who start podcasts, because I do a lot of podcast interviews, a lot of them. They're hoping and they're trying to get it here, right? But you've got listeners all over the world. The reason is because you felt it, you saw it happening. You just walked, you created the story and you walked into it.
I think I was only able to do that after I learned how to love myself, though,
Yes, well,
because
sure.
I would not have, I've had so many experiences in life where people made me feel like um I wasn't worthy or I wasn't good enough or I wasn't, whatever. Again, I am 100% accountable. I hold myself accountable for one allowing that and repeating that cycle and attracting that type because I thought that's what I deserved, um, in those times. But are you familiar with Mel Robbins?
No.
She's a motivational speaker and and life coach. Um, but she started doing in this last few years, I had a relapse of Lyme disease. I got sick again. I started getting depressed again. And Lyme disease, a lot of people don't know since it mimics almost every disease there is.
Mm,
And the suicide rate for Lyme disease is higher than any other terminal illness
wow.
because at one point, almost every week, I would say I had a new symptom. I went blind and then I
Oh,
went deaf. And then my liver started failing and my kidneys. And then I had a heart attack. And then, all these things like that. And then your skin and your nerves and you have strokes and all this start losing your brain, like Alzheimer's. And so after all of that, I got I had a sense of hopelessness, I guess. Um, Even after, healing myself in the past, twice at that time. And, um, and you kind of get in that spiral, of depression and,
mm-hmm.
well, I
To
guess
the bed.
just, yeah. And so he was on YouTube, a video one day. And she was talking about one time in her life when she was depressed and she said she went to the bath, you get up in the morning, you go to the bathroom, because that's the first time you have to, you're standing there brushing your teeth or whatever, look at yourself in the mirror. And there was a time that I went through, which I realized it after that fact, that I wouldn't even look in a mirror. And that's when you get to the point that you don't even want to see, you start that like that negative self talk and of unworthiness, or trying to find, and like in your own life, there's nothing that will, not money or things or hobby, nothing working. Some people become workaholics, some people um have addictions, some people, well, being a workaholic's an addiction, but um so stuff like that. But she said, even though, you can go in the bathroom and look at yourself in the mirror, and instead of starting all of that negative self-talk and saying, wow, look at this wrinkle, we all, tend to do that and start criticizing ourselves. But first thing in the morning, it's essential, because that's how that, kind of lays out the rest of your day and determines how your day is going to go. And so she said, instead of doing all that and saying, her hair was a mess, she didn't have any makeup on, all this stuff, she gave herself a high five in the mirror.
Hmm.
And so, without saying anything or thinking anything. And then I learned, it was after that I got my hypnotherapy certification. And acts like that. So anytime, if you think about in sports or whatever, that you've given somebody a high five, it's always been a positive action. Well, I mean, in my country anyways, I don't know in other countries, a high five, is basically telling someone good job, or good game, or good, it's just very positive and kind of exciting. You don't, like your friends or whatever back in the day, you give them a high five, and that's something positive with no words needed. And
Right.
so the act of doing that, she said, your brain automatically recognizes that, um, and sets in motion those positive, endorphins and things like that. So I was like, but if people try that, it's actually hard to do at first, because then you're like, we make excuses, we're like, oh, of course you have time to give yourself a high five. It's not like
Yeah.
takes
Hmm.
like 2 seconds. But of course, we all do it. We make excuses. Oh no, that's silly. I'm not going to do that. I'm not, whatever. But when you have nothing else, little things, like little actions like that for self love, absolutely make a difference, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things I teach people, clients and students, is that when you replace what doesn't work with what does, you don't go back to what doesn't. So if you're doing high fives in the morning after a week or two of doing that, and then you
Hmm.
stop, you're going to say, well, I liked when I did that, it made me feel better. So you'll go back to doing that. But you need to feel the
Hmm.
experience. You need to know, with what I call mindful awareness, that there's change going on, So I've learned a lot about mindful awareness, and I'm very much in tune with, if I'm out of balance or I'm in a negative, get it going in a negative space. I know what to do to get out of them, because the balance in life is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. So there's something that can get adjusted there, because it's all the mind. And then if you track that down, that doesn't exist anyway. So what's the point? But
Right.
while in the dream experience, those are things to do.
Now, in your life coach business, do you, and I looked, I didn't see this on your websites or anything. Um, do you have, especially for people in other countries, do you have like online courses that you give, or is it just
Actually,
on an individual basis?
there is an online course on a thing called Teachable. So if you Google Kevin Roth Teachable, there's a course you can take. I think it's like $200, 8 modules. But I talk to clients. I can talk to clients from around the world on Zoom. That's what I use, or a link like this, if they want to send it to me.
Right.
That's what I love about this. And I prefer doing it like that, because I get to see people, and then I get to kind of read them. and see
It's
what's
more
going on.
personal.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then if people go to the website kevinroth.org, they can fill out a form which asks them certain basic questions, and then we can do a interview and see, if it's a match. But that's how I do it. But if they can't afford coaching, because coaching isn't I'm not inexpensive, at least. I'm an expensive date, as they say. Um, there's the course that you can take.
Now, one thing I've learned with, um, I also a personal trainer and did that for quite a while, and people say, "Oh, that's so expensive." It's with anything. The same with my photography. People say that's so expensive, $200 for like a month or whatever. But here's my thing that I tell people, especially people in other countries that might not understand the value of until I did it myself. Having paying a life coach or things like that. I had paid on top of insurance, which is very high here in the US. I had paid, for therapy and psychiatrists, and I'm not saying they're not good. Absolutely not. But they don't tend to focus on your life as a well, I mean, they focus on your life as a whole, but not in the way a life coach does, I should say. Would you agree with that? So,
Well, I mean, I have my own style of coaching. I only teach from my own experience, and
but I mean, psychologists, psychiatrists, uh anybody that goes to those typically have the same stories. They'll say that they make me bring up this traumatic experience over and over until, and you could be going to that type of therapy for 5 or 6 years for that matter. Um, and that's kind of a form of condition. Actually, a psychiatrist told me this. It's kind of a form of conditioning because you do it so much that it doesn't affect you anymore.
mm,
Whereas a life coach, you kind of ultimately um, reach that same point, but in much less time and much less money. It's just people, that's the perspective thing. People don't think about that. Oh, I'm only paying my psychologist however much a month, say $100 a month. But over 6 years, that would be a lot of money. Whereas coming to someone like you that accomplishes so much more as a whole experience, and in less time.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the bottom line is you have to be ready to change.
Yes.
So, in my interviewing with people, I get a sense of whether they're going to do the work or not, no matter what they pay me. I've turned down people who've
Right.
offered me a lot of money, and I know that they're not going to do it. And I put a lot of energy into my clients. If their life doesn't change because of the work we're doing, um, something's not right. And I make sure during each session that whatever's not right ain't me. So I get really great results with people, but I think that has a lot to do with tuning into them and seeing where they're at and seeing how they implement my ideas into their life and coming back and telling me how that is working and then building upon that.
Do you feel, you said you're much happier now, obviously, than you were previously in your life. Do you feel that working with being kind of a teacher and a life coach and helping people in that manner, um, is that something that continually sparks your passion and in continually creating more, I guess, more, I don't say more like not courses, but more ways to educate people.
Yeah, I mean, I walk my talk. I teach what I live. So every time I guide people, I'm guiding myself, I'm teaching them, and through their experiences, they're teaching me.
Now, coming back to working with children, have you ever considered that again, like being a life coach to children?
No, because the kind of life coaching I do, children aren't quite developed enough. Uh, but I'll tell you, I think a lot of parents can use life coaching.
Oh gosh, I
You know,
myself included, yes.
yeah, I mean, but we're all just kind of bozos on the bus. But what was interesting about children with me is that I discovered later that the reason I didn't like performing for children is because I saw a lot of their angst that I had, and it pushed buttons in me because the way my parents handled anything that I needed or desired was to feed me. So I became an emotional leader. I used to be like 35 pounds heavier. So I wasn't nurtured properly. So they pushed buttons in me, and I would feel really kind of like, why aren't you paying attention to me? Why aren't you sitting there being quiet? It's the same thing as, mommy, 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 pay attention to me. If I'd gotten that from my mother, and she was not capable of really doing that because she was a sick lady for a long time, I wouldn't have reacted that way. So when I figured all that out and I understood it, then I started to like kids. I think that they're very, very funny, especially because of their
Yes.
honesty.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a kid coming up to me after a concert and having me sign his CD, and he said to me, "Are you famous?" And I said, "Well, have you ever heard of me?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, then I'm not that famous."
Yes, but I think kids now are profoundly more evolved, I should
Oh God,
say,
yeah, they're little adults.
than previous generations. I mean, and it keeps getting, I look at, my own kids or like nieces, nephews, things like that. And they are, uh, they don't even, and and that's the innocence of it. That's the innocence of children is they're not even aware sometimes of what they say or, the artwork they make or whatever, how much meaning it has. And I guess to an extent, we're all that way. I look back at some of the things that I created when I was little, and I'm like, I didn't even mean to do that, and that has a lot more meaning than I realized at the time. I was just drawing a bumblebee or something, and you know, or I'm assuming like you as well, having such um, meaningful spiritual experiences at a young age.
Well, that's
Um,
why arts are so important to have in the schools. The arts, music,
yes.
uh, woodworking, painting. It's an expression. It's a release.
I 100% believe that, at least in America, I don't know about other countries, but in America, the funding for public schools has dramatically decreased. And the first thing they do away with is the music and the arts.
Right.
And that's terrible. Because at 100%, art is what healed me. They said that, colors have their own vibrations and frequency, and as well as music, things like that. And they're even using, I used to volunteer at a nursing home that experimented with Alzheimer's patients and such, with painting and things like that. And they would actually, and music, they would actually recall parts of their lives after creating, and it's the creativity part.
Yep.
um but yeah, with kids, most schools around me, well, I mean, again, it's Kansas, but um there's many schools that don't have, um hardly have a music department anymore, and the same with art. So it's very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
I think, where do you see your future? I know you said you're writing a book, and
Well, I saw
um
my future. Uh, so the future is that the book will come out in the fall. What's cool about the book is that each chapter has a song that goes with it. So there'll be a recording.
Oh, wow, that's
So you
really
can
neat.
yeah, you can download the book and download the music.
Huh.
I hope now that COVID is somewhat at bay that I'll start traveling and giving workshops and residencies and talking to people about this. I think that when the book comes out in the fall, my gut tells me that it's going to fall into the right hands and that things are going to happen with my career. But I will tell you that I do see myself as I get older and older becoming more and more of a recluse. So I'll probably do a body of work of music and books, and then that's it. That's my hunch.
Do you think you'll continue to live in California or the States, or?
I was thinking about that today because it's expensive here.
Oh gosh, yes.
But the quality of life is like amazing. So it may cost me, let's say just as an example, and I don't know that this is true, but it may cost me, let's say, $1,000 more to live here a month than Kansas.
I think it costs like probably 5,000 more a month to
Oh no,
live there.
no,
Maybe
no,
more than that. I don't know.
no, because I'm paying 1,600 a month here, and I was paying, I think, almost 1,000 there. So let's just say it's 1,000 more. Gas is high. Depends how you live, also.
Right.
So let's say it's $12,000. So I had to ask myself, what amount of money would it be worth for you to leave California? It's not worth leaving California for $10,000 or $15,000 or even 20 a
Right.
year. But if I start having to pay more and more taxes and yada yada yada, and I could save 30 or $40,000 a year, assuming that I needed that money, I'd leave California. And thank God for the experience here. But San Diego is perfect weather. It's wonderful here. I mean, I don't
Well,
want to do snow again.
oh, that's what I was going to say. Kansas. I had a whole entire show about this between the pesticides in the so that was one of the reasons I relapsed with Lyme disease when I moved back. I moved from New York, and there are so many um allergens here, between all the crops, and people don't realize, like, everyone who comes here says they have had worse allergies than
Did
anywhere in the US.
I did have worse
um
allergy there.
yeah, and a lot of times that leads to like pneumonia and all kinds of stuff, so there's that.
Yeah,
um but they have the chemtrails, which have become increasingly, like, there's days, if you look at the weather app here, um, it'll say, like, the air quality is like, really, really bad. You shouldn't even go outside, so
yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's so many different things that,
yeah. That's true. There's a
and then
lot.
the weather sucks all the time. We have, like, 2 good days a month, and then the rest time it's either, it feels humid and, like, 120 degrees, or it's really cold.
So
So
you need to come to California.
you're, like, the 4th person, I mean, in a row that has said that.
Yeah, well, you're
It's
very California. You don't have the personality of the Midwest folk.
no. And
So
it's funny that you lived here too, because my other guests who have also said this, that I need to go to California, have also, that I didn't know prior to them being on my show, have also lived in Kansas. And they're like, that was,
you know,
that was one of,
make
that
a
was an
hint,
experience.
make a hint. But if anyone listening out there wants to import me and make me live, or have me invite me to live in, let's say, Italy or Paris
Oh, that
or
would be amazing.
any of those romantic places, I'll go. I'll deal with the snow.
Right before the shutdown, I considered moving to New Zealand because it was when I was studying herbal nutrition. There's an entire holistic village up in the mountains there, and they don't even use money in their village. Everything is done by bartering, and
Mm,
everybody's happy, and they live forever. You know,
yeah, yeah. Hmm,
I
interesting.
thought that would be a peaceful way. Everybody's still doing what they love, and they all have their businesses, and the town runs smoothly, but they don't really need laws, and they don't have a need for money. So, um,
Can't beat
whi-
that.
which ultimately, yeah, that would be nice if there wasn't an importance on that. Um, one thing you talked about silence being
Mm,
important,
mm.
I guess. Um, what did you mean by that?
Well, the mind uh, is never quiet. It always brings different things to you. What am I doing? You have to check your cell phone. You have to check your email. So if you just learn some form of meditation, I have a breathing exercise that's free and information on how to relax that's free on my website, kevinroth.org. But by being silent, you get a chance to listen to your inner guidance, your inner voice. And that will tell you if you're on track or off track, or what you need to do or what you don't need to do. We get caught up in what we think is important. You don't have to check your email or your texting every 5 minutes,
Mhm.
but we've been conditioned, to do that. So that's what silence is about. It's a wonderful meditative spiritual experience, silence.
I'm considering going back to a flip phone for that matter because, I was alive at a time before cell phones, and it was so much more peaceful.
Yeah,
Granted, they are, handy now in times of emergency or whatever, um but again, it's because we've created that. My son asked me one day as a teenager, he's like, because he doesn't have a cell phone. And my daughter said, she said, I get to get a cell phone at the same age you did, Mom. I'm like, okay, then you're going to be about 22 by the time you get to have a cell phone. Because I
yeah,
didn't have one. But but he said something that made me, I we always forget these things. He's like, but what do people do in an emergency? Because you can't, at least in Topeka, you can't run in a gas station and ask them to use their phone.
right.
And we don't have pay phones anymore.
True.
There are
Yeah.
no pay phones. So,
Well, again, it's learning balance, and it's learning that just because you have it, you don't have to have it on or use it all the time.
right.
So, when I go hiking, I turn the phone off and I don't put it on. I turn it off at night when I go to bed, and I put it on when I get up. And there are all these spam calls and all this other crap
Yeah.
waiting for me. So I didn't miss anything.
I think, well, do you think that the age of social media and the internet and cell phones and everything has, um, I guess, created more unhappiness in people as far as, when they're looking for sort of a meaning of life and things like that?
Well, the more noise you have in your head, the less you can listen to the truth in your heart.
That's true.
So, but again, people are consuming things and checking things because they don't want to pay attention to the hole in their soul. So, if they paid more attention to that, they would have less of a need for these other things. You know what I mean?
Do you find, and well, California has some many places to explore the outdoors and things like that, don't they? But I have, like, when I lived in New York, I know the people I knew in the city, some of them had not been out of this. I mean, they'd been to other cities, but as far as, when I would talk about camping or hiking or fishing or something, some of them had never been out of the city in their entire life.
Yeah.
And
Nature's important. Nature's important. That's why I
mhm,
love it here because I'm 20 minutes from the ocean and 55 minutes from the mountains.
and it allows you to get away from the noise. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
stay grounded. And I couldn't you know, I didn't believe them. I'm like, there's no way. How, what do you mean you have never been out? They're like, oh no, I don't go in the country or the woods, or I wouldn't feel safe, you know. And to me, on the other side of that, like, I would prefer to just, I grew up on a mountain, you know, and so I'm like, I cannot imagine. I have to go out in nature and get out of the city daily. Otherwise, it starts affecting me very negatively, you know.
And that's the
Um,
balance again.
hmm I wonder, gosh, there's so much, there's so much to that. But so where your website, I have also listed on my pages. Tell everyone again where they can find you.
It's kevinroth.org, and you can email me there, or you can email me at kevinroth.org@gmail.com. And that's the best place to get me. And if you want to know about my music, just I'm on iTunes and Amazon and all the Spotify, I guess, all the platforms. I have 50 albums, so you'll
Oh my gosh.
yeah, you'll have a long time listening if you listen to them all.
I don't think I realized that you had that many.
Yeah,
That's
most
a
don't.
lot.
Yeah, you know,
I
when I was going over the book with my editor, because we're in the final stages of it, I said, God, I've had such a huge life. I didn't realize it, all the crazy stuff that I've done. I mean, and she said, yeah, that's the fun part about writing books is you get to kind of look back a little bit. But what a strange little life I've had in a way.
I think people's lives are absolutely fascinating, and that's actually one reason I started this specific show, um, because I think everyone should tell their story, you know. And with the near death experience I had, where about the library, um, my guides or angels, or you know, whatever you want to call them, told me, well, no, you're not going to die yet, because I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I have. I've had all of these near death experiences, and I still, you know, and they said, you're not going to die because you haven't written your book yet. Well,
Mm,
I thought that meant a literal book, you
mm,
know. I mean which it could, but which I haven't done yet. But then um seeing the library, it to me it meant that I hadn't been living. I actually hadn't been living my life. You know, I had been surviving. Of course, I had been going through the motions, doing the same thing, you know, that I thought was expected, going to work, coming home, whatever, you know, all my life, but I hadn't been living. And so I think that's what, when people tell their stories and write the book of their lives, I think we, every day we wake up, we write the story of our lives just by
mhm.
living it.
Yeah.
Um, but that was profound to me, because I'm like, wow, that's true. You know, I've been communicating with dead people all my life, but I myself was never actually living. So, you know, it's what we get comfortable with.
Yeah.
And um I think, how do you think at this point in your life, how do you think being, I guess, spiritual and knowing the things you know, as far as in your own existence and reality, how do you think that that affects the relationships in your life?
It affects everything because it's the way you look at things. You know, I was going to invite someone over for dinner not long ago, and I would have normally done it, but this person has a lot of drama in their life and can be very negative. So I thought to myself, do you want to step into that? And I thought, no, not really. And then I said, why do you feel that you need company tonight? Because I'm pretty good company by myself. And then I thought, well, you know, I guess I'm feeling a little this or a little that. So I didn't invite him. And we went out for coffee the next day. And so I make choices who to be with and who not to be with. And who I'm associating with and not, based on the vibe I get. I'm very careful now, choosing to be someone who does not get involved in drama. Someone wanted to, in fact, funny, someone wanted to hook me up with somebody that they knew, a friend, to date. And they happened to mention in their conversation that this person drank a lot, like four. And
Hmm.
I said, I'm not getting involved with an alcoholic,
Yeah.
knowing I'm just not. It's too much drama. He needs AA. He doesn't need KR. um, so I'm very careful. No matter how good looking that person was,
Right.
no. You know. So when you have a near death experience or you're given a death sentence like I was, you get real and you say, you know what? If I only have a short amount of time to live, I'm not spending it doing what I did that got me sick.
Hmm.
I'm going to do it the way I'm going to be blissful. That's why after a year of being here, and the melanoma never returned, I didn't go back to the way I was before melanoma. I like it the way I am. This morning I got up, I had to go to the bank, but after that I went to my favorite coffee place with my dog and I just hung out and I came back and I cooked something. I was listening to some music and got ready for this interview. I'm blessed to have clients and a living, and that's how I spend my day. It's very beautiful. I went for a hike too, as a matter of fact. So, which was a little too warm, but that's what I do.
Do you think, I go through now, and people I encounter in my everyday especially, sometimes family, sometimes, which I don't really, I'm like you. I tend to isolate myself if I'm anywhere near negativity or things like that, because I don't want to be involved. I don't want to lower my vibration, because with Lyme disease, any stress or lack of sleep, anything like that can, um it will 100% come back with a vengeance, and has numerous times. And so I try not to, the same, not to be involved in. Plus, I just don't spend my time worried about or thinking about what everybody else is doing, or what they're thinking, or all the drama that I used to consume my mind with, in my younger years. I don't, it's silly to me to even, entertain that. So I, I was, where's I going with that? I don't think that others realize, though, after you realize how precious life is. I hear people around me talking about, they're like, I'm so bored and I don't know what to do with my days. And I spent, 7 hours watching Grey's Anatomy and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't think there's enough time in a day to do everything I want to do, and maybe that's the switch when you actually wake up and realize how precious life is, because you don't take those things for granted. All of your time is utilized doing something that that brings you joy, or productiveness, or things like that. And it's heartbreaking to me, because I see so many people around me that waste their days doing something still to fill that void. But there's
Yeah,
nothing you can do to tell them, because they don't want to change.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I only, I do what pleases me, and I'm very clear. I do what I love. So I'm coaching, or I'm writing books, or I'm hanging with my dog, or I'm cooking, or I'm going hiking. I don't. There's not a lot of stuff I need to do. I'm very content
Right.
kind of by myself, um, and I don't need a lot of those other things. A friend of mine said, you need to go back out on the road and give concerts, and I said, I'm just not there anymore. I'll go out and talk about this stuff and sing some, but I have no interest in having a hit record or plus I'm making more money now than I did as a musician. So, and I don't have to go anywhere. I'm doing it out of my
Yeah,
home.
you've already accomplished that.
Yeah. So uh, I just do what pleases me. And when I feel that there's negativity, I don't go there. And sometimes that happens. I was at the bank today and they didn't want to cash a check because well, it doesn't matter why, but they had to call the bank manager over to get approval and all this stuff. And I started to get like upset. It's like, I have a check. This is a bank. You're my bank. I want to deposit the check. What's the deal? And then I stopped because I use mindful awareness and I look at myself and I'm thinking, you're doing nothing wrong. It is a bank, it is a check, and they will deposit it. And if they need to do this little song and dance routine to get it done, just watch the show. And that's what I
Mhm.
did. Where before I would feel very angry and why are you giving me a hassle and all this kind of stuff, but it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything because even if I were to ask them, all they would tell me is it's bank policy, which doesn't get me anywhere except upset. So I was
Right.
able to nip it in the bud, and that's the same thing I do with people, places, and things. It was funny because last week I went to buy cheese, and I asked the lady at the deli about the cheese, and I don't know whether it wasn't me. She was incapable of answering me about the cheese, and first thing that comes up is like frustration and anger, and then I thought that's ridiculous. I don't. Maybe she's on drugs. I don't know, but I'm just asking her which Parmesan is the hardest. So it's so I just kind of looked at her like, you poor thing, and I don't get caught up in it. I used to get caught up in it's crazy. So I don't try not to get caught up in anything like that.
I mean, I try not to also. The biggest I still occasionally get caught up when it has to do with my kids. Because with kids, a lot of times, especially, when they're your own and the whole protective mother thing, and that's, we're in our nature. Um, for instance, my daughter came home upset one day after school, and she said, there was a student in another class or on the playground or whatever that that didn't like her and that made fun of her hair or something. She has red hair like me, and so she gets made fun of a lot for it. And she was so upset because she's one of those people. She's very sweet and typically um gets along with everybody because she tends to be able to empathize well with others. And I said I was like, there's probably a good, I don't know, 40,000 people that might not like me, but that doesn't make up for the other. y- I could meet millions of other people in the world that might like me. You're not going to be for everyone, but trying to explain that to an 8-year-old is hard because certain things like that are their world at the time. That's because they don't realize the insignificance of it, which again is back to society. We place such a big value on what others think
Hmm.
of us, I guess.
Yeah.
But other than that, I try not to involve myself, get involved with the drama or the things like that, or let things. I don't react to things um, like I used to. I guess they just seems um, like a negative way to use my energy, I
Yeah,
guess.
like I said, when you replace what doesn't work with what does, you don't go back. So once you recognize that,
Mhm.
then you nip it in the bud, like I did. And just because I know all this stuff doesn't mean that I'm happier. I do everything right. If I have a screw up, sometimes I tell my clients about my experience with it. Uh, so there is no perfection in life. There's nothing perfect. So we're going to screw up even if we know better.
Yes.
You but still we get emotional. I don't have any kids, but I have a dog. If the dog gets hurt, I'm terribly upset.
Oh gosh, I have 4 pets that I somehow adopted,
Yeah.
rescued. They
So
might have rescued me actually.
yeah, yeah. There's no ways. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So at this point in my life, I'm 41, and as they say, people, we all go through tests in life, and as you get older, the tests get more challenging, and it has to, because otherwise we wouldn't evolve or grow. So I started looking at life like school. So once at 39, I was feeling pretty bold. I was like, I've learned a lot in life. Learned a lot in life. Bam, 40 hit me. That was a bad year.
Mhm.
So then I was like, okay, I must be back in fourth grade. I'm in fourth grade now.
Well,
So
yeah, life's a school, but then
yes.
you're out of it. You'll graduate soon enough.
Yep. And it goes by way too fast after you realize those things.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, oh my God, it has almost been 2 hours, and it has been such a pleasure having you on.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I look forward to following your book path you said it in the fall,
Yeah, it's called Between the Notes.
between the notes.
Yeah, and it talks about a little bit about my experiences, and then it talks about it's sort of in three sections so far. The second section is about science and spirituality, and then the third section is what you can do practically, what are practical things you can do to make your life happier. So, and then it'll be music.
I thought maybe you were writing the three sections based on what you saw when you were 8.
Well, there is. I mean, it's all mixed together.
Right.
But someone said, "Well, it sounds a little far out that you saw your life and that it's worked out for you. It sounds like." Well, he said it sounded like bullshit, and I said, "Well, is it bullshit that at the age of 3 I sat down at the piano and I played something without reading music?" And he said, "Well, no, that's just talent." I said, "Well, what's talent? Where does that come from?" And he said, "Well, it comes from God." I said, "Well, yeah," and it goes on and on and on. So again, like I said earlier in our conversation, it's tough to explain the unexplainable.
It
Life,
is.
we're in the middle of infinity, and we're spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour. So I think the most important thing that people can do, and which is what I wrote the book, is to find out who they are inside. And there's some wonderful books. Ramana Maharshi, there's one that's written by David Godman, Be As You Are, and learn about this dream life and learn about reality. You can watch near death experiences and know that this is really an illusion and a dream, and there's a way to do it that'll work better for you than other ways. And that's the message I guess I have.
And that in itself is quite the feat too. It's difficult. It's difficult for me to figure out who you really are, and what you really want in life. And most people don't ask themselves that.
No, but if you ask, you'll find out. And you're really,
Mhm.
we're like fish in the ocean looking for water. We're that consciousness. We are that God. We
Mhm.
are that thing. And once you get it, it's everything else becomes funny.
It does.
Yeah.
We're
Well, I love talking to you. Good luck, and we'll get you the book and have your listeners reach out to me if they want.
Is the release of that, is that going to be on your website, or
Oh
do you
yes,
know? Okay. I didn't know if you knew where it was going to come out or.
no, it'll be there, and I'll be doing a lot of podcasts. It'll be on my Facebook page. I don't do a lot of social media. I think I have an Instagram thing when I get to it, but yeah. And I think my gut is that the book will do it'll do pretty well. I think that's my impression of it anyway. We'll see. However it does, it does. It doesn't matter one way or the other.
But if you have faith in it, that's the first,
Oh yeah,
you
well,
know.
I do. It's about my experiences, so for sure. We'll get your copy.
I look forward to it. You have been such a pleasure, Kevin. And um, gosh, there's so much now. I'm gonna go listen to more of your music. I found quite a bit of it online. Actually, I'm gonna search through my all my records now because these synchronicities happen, and I probably randomly. I haven't even gone through. I have like two giant tote things full of records that I bought that I haven't even looked at yet. So
One of them may be me. You never
I
know.
know. Um, but thank you, and thank you all for listening. I'm so grateful for the amount of listeners. Um, it means a lot to myself. It means a lot to my guests, such as Kevin as well. I'm sure, as far as the support that people give us, and hopefully they my listeners have also been as inspired by you as I have, because it's amazing, and it's amazing to be able to reach people all the way across the world. So
Yeah.
um, next week is, oh gosh, next week is Independence Day, I think, on Monday um, in the US. So I will probably have a pre-recorded um, broadcast, because people here tend to like fireworks, and um, so thank you all. Have a good night and be safe out there.
Bye
I've got
bye.
to